Hey everyone, today is going to be a fun one, I think, because I have a book with me by Deepak Chopra, who is a huge voice in the New Age worldview, broadly speaking, and his book is called Quantum Healing. This is probably the most defining book of Deepak. I'm not sure because he's written so many, but it's definitely a big title for him. It's one of his older books, originally published in 1889. I've got the updated and revised edition from 2015. I've read through Quantum Healing, studied it. I've probably never written more notes from any single book, over 20,000 words of notes and highlights. And my goodness, I have some thoughts. Reading this book, it seemed that a lot of his ideas and arguments were scattered about, but they're there. It just takes a lot of work to systematize his thoughts. Most of Chopra's critics don't have that kind of time or patience, so a lot of the polemic against him is pretty surface level. Like, he doesn't talk about science right. He misleads people away from legitimate medical help with mumbo jumbo word gymnastics. What I want to do is try and decode this book and lay out the main thesis for this book, how he builds his arguments and how he defends the points that he makes. I'm not a physicist or quantum theorist or medical practitioner, but as a Christian, I do study philosophy and worldviews. So there is so much packed into this that I'm going to be spending 3 videos to work through it all. This is video number 1, so let's start with my best attempt to summarize quantum healing. Okay, so the book Quantum Healing is about an alternative approach to health and wellness with huge aspirations. According to Chopra, conventional medicine can be helpful, but has a fatal flaw because it is materialistic. That is, modern medicine operates under a worldview that everything in this universe is material. It's all just lifeless, mindless atoms and chemicals. And so modern conventional medicine only deals with the material problems of a person's body. However, Deepak Chopra argues that the best medicine for the body is the body itself, because the body knows how to heal itself, and we can attain a state of consciousness where we help our body do what it's supposed to do. He goes full out with this. I mean, the body can heal itself from cancer. It can stop or even reverse the process of aging. Pretty unlimited. This kind of healing is called quantum healing. Chopra says that he likes the word quantum because it denotes a jump to a higher place, like a quantum leap, and the word quantum also denotes the fundamental building blocks of reality. Reading on, you'll find him talking about a kind of dip into the quantum realm which creates these changes. So he doesn't view quantum science as just a metaphor. In fact, he denies that quantum science is merely a metaphor on page 116, which is weird because he told Richard Dawkins explicitly it's just a metaphor, but then he kind of retracts a bit. I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. Maybe he changed his mind, I don't know. Whatever the case, the journey of quantum healing can be divided into 4 big teaching points. First, we need a metaphysical shift that would enable this view to be possible. We need to understand that mind is more fundamental than matter. So, rather than believe that all of reality is reduced down to lifeless, mindless atoms and chemicals as conventional medicine does, we should believe that all of reality is ultimately mind or intelligence. And this mind expresses itself through atoms and physical things. Second, since the mind is more fundamental than matter, we can apply this metaphysical worldview to how we understand the body. If our mind is king over our body, then we can modify our body by modifying our mind. So that's the reason why Chopra believes quantum healing works. We are intelligence. We are consciousness. Every cell in our body is sentient, and it's not just the brain that thinks, it's the whole body that thinks. After all, everything physical is governed by the universal mind. I mean, these are the implications he draws out for when mind is more fundamental than matter. Third, Chopra seeks to show that there is evidence for quantum healing actually working. So you have a lot of stories in the book of people reaching a higher state of consciousness, and to the doctor's surprise, they're healed. I mean, that's just one type of example that he will give. And then fourth, Chopra explains various steps on how we can reach a higher level of consciousness and experience quantum healing ourselves. Most of the techniques he shares line up with the Vedas and other ancient Eastern ideas, and he's quite fond of the alternative medicine practice called Ayurveda, which applies these techniques. Within Chopra's book, these 4 big teaching points are not in successive order. They're all mixed together. I'm just trying to identify the main ingredients of this salad. But if these 4 points are all true, then a much needed breakthrough in the medical field is to unlock ourselves into a higher state of consciousness, to a place where sickness is not allowed. Eventually, we will be able to train our minds to keep the body in alignment with nature and have unlimited potential. Although Chopra understands that his methods do not have a stellar success rate, he believes it's just a slow journey, probably because our mind-body connection is so severed by stress and we are so ingrained in this culture. So the answer for the next big renaissance in healing is found in the fact that it's more miraculous than traditional medicine ever imagined, but also more natural than religious people claim. Ultimately, however, the journey toward quantum healing is really not about physical healing. It's about reaching a higher place of peace in life so that you can be fully you no matter what is going on physically. Got it? Okay, great. So let's dive deeper into each of these 4 big teaching points. This week, I'll talk about the first point. Next week will be points 2 and 3. And the week after that, I'll reflect on his 4th teaching point and offer an alternative view, which I believe is more realistic and even more hopeful. First, the idea that mind is more fundamental than matter. How does Chopra defend this idea? Well, I managed to assemble a lot of statements from quantum healing which put this together. For instance, Chopra talks about how consciousness simply cannot arise from mere matter, so the materialistic worldview doesn't work. He says that DNA is smart, and so therefore its atoms must also be smart. And if its atoms are also smart, then that would presumably be the case for any kind of atom. He argues that underlying intelligence is the only conceivable reason that the body is able to respond to a cut, causing cells and chemicals to travel to different parts of the body with specific jobs to get things done. He talks about how even though every cell of our body is replaced every several years, our memory outlives those cells, and so it's more permanent. He claims that neuropeptides, quote, spring into existence at the touch of a thought, a transformation of non-matter into matter. So thoughts have the power to bring things into existence. I'm not entirely sure what he means by this, because 35 pages later in the next chapter, he says that the atoms were already there, but it's the configurations of the neuropeptides that spring out of nowhere. He says that the smallest thing cannot be physical, because anything physical could conceptually be divided even smaller. Concepts like love, music, thoughts, smells, and tastes cannot be explained physically. He observes that the human fetus develops by, quote, remembering and imitating the shapes of fish, amphibians, and early mammals. He also says that all of reality is simply a creation of our mind. After all, your experience with reality is entirely constricted to the senses which are delivered to you through the mind. He says that your reality changes by your mind. For instance, something is fast or heavy or tasty because your mind says so, but these realities could change from the perspective of a different mind. Sound is selectively heard, and it's different to a musician than someone who is tone deaf. All of this goes to show that the fundamental base of reality is not atoms and chemicals which create mind. It's mind which creates fundamental reality. Page 100, life itself is intelligence, riding everywhere on chemicals. Page 226, these discoveries prove that our intelligence extends to the entire ecology. Mind has a physical basis everywhere. Any attempt to isolate it in the skull runs into serious objections. Instead of viewing unbounded awareness with skepticism, we need to see that every thought is unbounded. You cannot see, hear, or touch anything in the world without reaching beyond the illusory boundary of the isolated body. To watch a sunset is literally like watching yourself. For those of you watching who are atheists or skeptics, you probably don't buy any of this. I'm a Christian, I buy some of this, but not all. I would agree that materialism as a worldview has problems, and I think that some, not all, but some of his reasons do a good job of showing that. I don't think that everything in existence can be explained in terms of these material things like atoms and chemicals. I mean, the existence of consciousness, the reality of concepts like love and passion. I would add goodness and evil. There's a lot to our experience of reality, which gets more and more difficult to explain the more and more you press into this idea that it's all material. But I would not flee from materialism to the alternative suggested by Chopra. The idea of a mind, in and of itself, is just far too abstract to work as a fundamental reality of our world. Maybe you've heard the expression, love will make a way. It's an expression. Like, love doesn't do anything. It's people who love each other who make a way. But if you say love will make a way and take that literally, you have committed the logical fallacy of reification. That is, taking something abstract and treating it like a concrete thing. Likewise, we can't say that mind or consciousness is the fundamental reality of our universe. That would be as nonsensical as saying that the number 4 or hope is the fundamental reality of our universe. I mean, these are abstract concepts. That doesn't necessarily mean they aren't real, but it does mean that they cannot be explanations for something which is concrete, such as physical reality. If you want to say that this mind that undergirds the universe is different because it is concrete, well, at that point, I don't think you're talking about mind anymore. It sounds to me like you're talking about something concrete that has a mind. But Chopra is not willing to go there. He says this on page 132. Religion has been hauled into the discussion, usually by militant atheists, because claiming that intelligence is woven into the universe implies a cosmic mind. A cosmic mind sounds a lot like God, and God raises the unholy specter of intelligent design. People are now wrapping their minds around how design and intelligence can both exist without a creator God. The dilemma is less painful in the East, since the philosophies derived from ancient India didn't automatically connect cosmic mind with a god in human form. India has always been comfortable with abstractions, especially when it comes to higher consciousness. Painful or not, it really ought to be, because there is a deep philosophical problem when you treat abstract things in a concrete way. That problem doesn't go away if you are born in a different part of the world. But Chopra is running with this idea as if it's not an issue at all. On pages 44 through 45, he says, for the moment, let's keep our definition of the word intelligence as simple and practical as possible. Rather than referring to the intelligence of a genius, which may seem both exalted and abstract, I define it simply as know-how. So if I understand this right, he is suggesting that know-how is the explanation for why DNA in a cell can pick out the segment from its 5.8 billion bits of information to make a hand where the hand goes and an eye where the eye goes. It's done because of know-how. He's saying that know-how is the governing influence in our immune system so that it sends the proper material to the proper part of the body to fix a paper cut or a broken bone. And he's saying that know-how inside our bodies is as simple and practical as possible, and that the intelligence of a genius may seem abstract. Have you ever had an issue with your computer? Maybe a virus. So you call customer service, and the voice on the phone says that they want to work on your computer remotely. So you allow your computer to connect with their computer remotely, and you're literally watching the cursor move around on your screen, opening things up, changing stuff around, and it fixes a virus. What do you make of this? Assuming that materialism doesn't work, would you say that the simple and practical explanation is that your computer was influenced by know-how, or because somebody with know-how worked on your computer remotely? The Christian position recognizes that there is intelligence at work in our universe, but it's not the abstract idea of intelligence itself. It's not know-how. Rather, Colossians 1:17 says that he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Hebrews 1:3 says that he upholds the universe by the word of his power. The sustainer of our universe is God in Christ. Another objection I have with Chopra is the idea that all of reality is created in our mind. He teaches and defends this idea in chapter 11, but it's rather inconsistent with everything else he has been doing and saying. For most of his book, Chopra talks about mind and consciousness as a universal thing, like this one unified cosmic consciousness. But in this chapter, he goes off to say that your mind creates reality. So mind becomes individualized, it becomes subjective, it becomes relative, rather than a cosmic thing from which all matter participates. So for example, on page 230, he says, the common sense notion that this chair is hard to the touch is not true until you restate it as this chair is hard because my brain made it that way. The chair is not hard at all to a cosmic ray which zips through it like air. A neutrino zips through the whole earth with equal ease. Likewise, he says this, the idea that an omelet tastes good has no more weight than that it tastes bad. The same is true of every other sensation. Is a goose down pillow soft? Not to someone with a migraine who groans with pain when his head touches it. Does a jet move fast? Not if you view it from the moon. The problem with all of this is that words like hard, soft, and fast are all words which by nature are used to describe subjective experiences. So the argument is just stacking the deck. No one denies the existence of subjective experiences, but the existence of subjective experience is irrelevant to the existence of objective reality. I could just as well measure the density of a chair, or the resistance given off by a pillow when pressure is applied, or the velocity of a jet. That measurement is going to be the same whether or not I have a headache or observe it from the moon. To give a different example, true story, I bought a cereal box like a month ago, and on the front it said, help us restore 25 million square feet. Would you say that's a lot of land? Well, that depends how you look at it. Fine, whatever. But either way, it's 25 million square feet, or almost 1 square mile. So no, a chair is not hard because our brain makes it hard. A chair is experienced as hard to the touch because the chair possesses a certain amount of density and bond between its atoms, which does not allow human bodies to pass through it. That's the chair's deal, not my brain's. It's one thing to say that we experience reality through the 5 senses. It's quite another thing to say that reality is created by our senses. And if we are going to be brutally honest, nobody who teaches that reality is created in their head really believes that reality is created in their head. They say they believe it, but they just don't. If these teachers really believed that reality was created in their heads, then why would they bother teaching this idea to an audience that is entirely a figment of their own imagination? Guys, if Chopra is right about this, then you and I are nothing more than creations of his mind. And if that's the case, what is he going to accomplish by changing the opinions of projections of himself? So I'm not convinced Chopra really believes this stuff. I suspect he's just attracted to the novelty of it without really thinking it through. In fact, at one point in Quantum Healing, Chopra is talking about the idea that I am the universe and how some people suggest that it's not real for them, but maybe for others. He says on page 268, yes and no. A person's consciousness has to shift in order to realize in a higher state of awareness that I am the universe. But the statement can't apply simply to those few people. Only someone with medical school training can look through a microscope and identify T cells from the immune system, yet everyone has T cells. So it's not the statement that I am the universe that we should doubt. Either it's true or it isn't. The real issue is how to arrive at the state of consciousness that reveals this truth. Notice that when it comes to these New Age ideas, which Chopra teaches, he considers these ideas to be true, regardless of whether or not someone believes they are true. He says that you are the universe, regardless of whether you believe it or not. And he is trying to convince his skeptics that they are wrong and he is right. So it seems that even he believes that reality is not created in your mind. Reality is outside of your mind, and it's the task of the mind to believe that which is real. Everyone who teaches anything with the intent to persuade understands this to be the case. The problem happens when we encounter something we disagree with, and instead of dealing with the discrepancy like we normally would, we conveniently miscategorize the objective truth claim as a subjective experience, and we say, that's your truth, this is my truth. No, it's your belief and my belief about truth. There is some banter on the internet that quantum theory proves reality is constructed by your mind. To be honest, I don't remember Chopra mentioning this in the book, but it's worth bringing up. Simply put, there's something called a double slit experiment, where electrons are being shot on a surface with two different slits, and those that make it through land on a surface beyond the slits, creating a wave-like pattern, which is weird and awesome because you'd think it would just result in two different piles corresponding to the two slits. But as soon as you observe which slit any particular individual electron goes through, the resulting wave pattern is lost, and you end up with two piles. Because of this, some conclude that it was your knowledge of the electron's path which changed the result of the experiment. I don't know quantum physics well enough to speak much about this myself, but I happen to be nerdy enough to have watched a lecture on quantum physics taught at MIT, available on YouTube, where the professor likewise denies the idea that it has anything to do with our knowledge. But he also explains that the reason the pattern gets messed up when we observe electrons is because the process of observing electrons involves a sensor, and any wavelength emitted from the sensor short enough to give us useful data about the electron's position will necessarily interfere with the results of the electron's path. He doesn't show this through guesswork or theory. He shows this because of math. So we have to understand that reality is not created in your mind. Rather, there is one reality, and our perception of reality is filtered through our mind, and we owe it to ourselves to apply reliable filters as we think about reality. I say all this because the life, ministry, death, and resurrection of Jesus are categorically objective truth claims. I don't decide by my own preference whether or not Jesus was resurrected 2,000 years ago outside the gates of Jerusalem. I don't decide whether or not we are saved by grace through faith in him. I don't decide this any more than I decide whether 2 + 2 = 7 or 4 or -12. Either it's true or it isn't. But if it is true, and Jesus really did resurrect from the dead, and he really is our Savior, and it's really the case that no one can be saved from their sin and reach God except through him, then we really need to let people know about it. Next week, we will continue looking through quantum healing. Apart from this metaphysical view of mind over matter, which we discussed today, there's a lot more to this book that I look forward to sharing with you next week. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.